Dr. Adamczyk, I want to ask you a question about doubting. So, doubting plays a major role in the religious journey, and you mentioned that adults sometimes doubt their faith, which I wonder about whether that makes it hard to then intentionally transmit a faith to their children. I'm just curious, is there perhaps a way to educate both adults and kids on the doubting part of religion so as to bolster the sense that everyone's on that journey? But yeah, how does doubting play a role in how parents pass the faith to their children?
Yeah. There's at least a couple of ways that emerged in our interviews. One is related to some of the stuff that we've already talked about, and that is that parents were sometimes hesitant to pass on higher levels of religious belief to their children because they themselves sometimes doubted the religion. And so that would kind of come up as like, okay, well, I don't want them to be overly committed to the religion because my own self, I'm having some questions about my faith. And so then that came up. The second thing is that a lot of parents felt like there had been a time in their lives when they doubted religion, especially more religious parents, and that they kind of had to come to terms with it. And they felt that they were looking for the source of the doubt. Now, some of that doubt is just natural, I think, as people seek information and answers. But some of the parents also talked about how their own parents maybe were too religious for them or tried to push religion on them. And then that led these people to want to step away from their faith. And so then that too affected parents in the sense that they wanted to be very careful with their children because they didn't want to drive them away. And so they tried not to be too aggressive with religion and give them more time and space to ponder these things without driving them away. And like I mentioned in some of our other discussions, parents are very worried about their kids not necessarily leaving religion, although that was important to a lot of parents, but not being friends with them once they became adults, or not having a good relationship with them once they became adults. And so this element of doubting came up in a couple of these different ways. But as you know, Jill, and I'm sure you talked extensively, and many of your counterparts have as well, doubting is perhaps a natural part of this process of having religious faith, of taking religious faith seriously, of reflecting and thinking through one's religious faith. So my sense is that getting parents, congregational members, even church leaders to talk about their doubts, that's part of their journey and how they got beyond those doubts, or what helped convince them to keep going down the path of faith when they had those doubts. I think a lot of that would be really useful to young people, especially because it could probably be problematic if they think nobody ever doubts, but then they're starting to have some doubts. So the question is, well, how do you manage that? Or do you know people that did doubt but are still religious? So providing those models and unpacking that, I think there's some usefulness there.
Yeah, and it occurs to me too that we experience doubts for all kinds of reasons, I think, and I think that's part of the developmental process of faith and kids becoming young adults as well. But there's also what we're noticing in young people right now is that a lot of young folks really value making a difference in this world, which is seen as very wounded, whether we're talking about climate crisis or pains that they see friends go through or mental health struggles. There's heaviness for young people in these days, financial insecurity, housing, food, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, it can go on. And that can also lead to a lot of doubting and wondering about, okay, if we have an all-loving God, what's going on here, right? These two things don't seem to compute. So any of the adults that you interviewed, did that kind of stuff come up about talking about the deeper struggles of life in general and how faith intersects with those things?
When it came up, it was religion as a toolkit to help you, was kind of the ways in which it came up. But as a reflection tool, or as a guide, that wasn't as much there. I don't think parents were talking to their kids about doubt, and I don't think they felt religious organizations were equipped to manage those discussions in a sensitive way, in a way that
Yeah.
wouldn't just drive their kids away or wouldn't, make everybody really uncomfortable, or that
Yeah.
they probably didn't feel like they could confess that to their
Sure.
organizations. So it was
Sure.
more like, if there was a way that you could, eh, hold on to religion in some way and get through it with your doubts, and that there was, I don't know, again, going back to kind of the toolkit, how do you come across that? I think they thought that was useful, but they didn't strike me as particularly reflexive on this issue. Now, granted, we talked to a lot of more religious parents. We also talked to parents that weren't religious at all.
Yep.
So I don't know if we may have missed some people that were more in the middle that we wouldn't have necessarily been talking to, or if the parents we did talk to just didn't necessarily always feel that comfortable telling us about their doubts.
Yeah.
But I think it's a really good question, and probably an important area to examine.
Yeah. Yeah. It strikes me that hope is at the root of all these things, right? And parents find hope in the church being a safe place for kids to bring who they are, and for them to sort of have this toolkit, as you've said, right? And hope being something that is that, but I think might be a little bit more, or at least potentially offer more for young people who are really wrestling with some of these things. So that's absolutely fascinating. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm happy to help. And I will say too, Jill, just to reiterate, I didn't find many parents who talk to their kids about not having religious faith or questioning faith. So again,
Yeah.
it, it's important, but I don't think people are talking much about it. So
Yeah. That's also super interesting. Because I think that's something that comes up in church sometimes, is how do we work through those difficult phases? And I don't think adults are the only ones having those kinds of questions. So fascinating. Thank you.